Well, hello, Dr. Kranitz. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on.
And I'm so excited to be here and support this journey of yours in creating this great podcast.
Oh, thank you. I love you so much. For those listening, Kranitz, as I call him, but Matt is one of my best friends. And so we've been talking about doing this for such a long time. And now here we are in the flesh, recording, doing all the things. It makes my heart so happy. A question I like to ask all my interviewees on each episode is, are you spiritually active? So I'd love to ask you the same. Are you spiritually active?
I would say that I am. I feel like, I consider it like a practice, and I'm sure you've talked about that a ton. Sometimes you're more spiritually active and sometimes you're not as much. I would say currently right now, not as much, just because I kind of decompress and like with graduating from med school and things like that, it makes it harder to really feel the pressure of needing to be spiritually active. I think sometimes we realize that we don't need to be undergoing something or like under a large amount of stress in order to be able to do these spiritual acts and be in practice spirituality. But when I was actively in it, I was for sure practicing spirituality.
That's amazing. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's not effort that we need to put in all the time. It's simply just being and letting whatever resonates with you come up as it comes up or pass as it passes. What are some of your favorite modalities or ways to express yourself in spirituality
So
or in your
yeah,
own practices?
yeah, I think it really depends. I'm all about I'm all about the motto obey your mood. So I think that I change my modalities quite often. Sometimes it's not just one thing. Like I don't always say, oh, I need, I'm feeling stressed about this one thing. I need to do this type of spirituality. I need to do meditation. I need to get up and go on a run. I need to have a conversation with a good friend. Like I feel like I'm sort of always ever changing those different modalities. I would say probably the one that I come the closest to is soft belly breathing, and just sort of a form of concentrative meditation. I think that, and also just sort of relying on the connections. I'm a very connection driven person, as you know, but maybe not your listeners. And so what I do is I like to reach out to the people I care about the most, and I find a lot of my spirituality through those kinds of conversations.
I love that. I would agree that you are a very connection driven person. Beautiful way to say it. So I've known you since we were little babies in college, silly times, and we became friends very quickly. But for our listeners who maybe don't know as much about you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey thus far?
Yeah,
Such a
so
loaded question.
I know, right? So my name's Matt, or Matthew, or Kranitz, as she likes to call me. I'm originally born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up here my whole life, and then moved away to Tucson, Arizona, where I met Caitlin at the University of Arizona. Got a degree in physiology and Spanish. Then kind of was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with life. I knew I'd always wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't know exactly the medium in which I was going to do so. Um, and then I got kind of the opportunity while I was doing some research in Tucson in my year off after graduation, as well as I was volunteering, and so on and so forth. And I ended up getting the opportunity to go to the Caribbean to study for medicine, which was kind of the non-traditional route. Then I spent the next 2 years, basically, well, really 7 months in Barbados, practicing more of the classroom side of medicine. And then COVID happened, and then ended up coming home and doing the rest from my bedroom here in Arizona. Then I moved out to LA where I finished my clinical rotations and kind of figured out what I wanted to do, which was pediatrics. And so then recently, I just graduated medical school. I'll be starting my pediatric residency at Loma Linda University in California in about a month and a half. So very exciting things. Some other things about me. I'm a Katy Perry enthusiast. She's my mother. I also I love people. I love their stories. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I love it. Every time I think of Katy Perry, I think of you. I'm like,
As
wow,
you
this
should.
song comes on. Yeah. I'm like, Kranitz, he's right around the corner.
Yep.
Um, Big congratulations for you just graduating. I know that process was no easy feat to go through med school. And of course, you're still moving through that process, right, of residency and really finding your home in your own particular practice. But can you share with us, like, how did you know you wanted to go into medicine, specifically with pediatrics, and how has that process been for you up to this point?
Yeah, so I've kind of considered myself to be someone who's kind of gone through a little bit more life events than the average individual. And I say that in no way of saying like, oh, my life's harder in any way, shape, or
Mm-hmm.
form, but it's just something that I've had to kind of observe as I've been reflecting on my life, especially during the residency interview process. You're kind of forced to look at life and say, how did this influence me? How did these events, things happen? And how have you come out of it on the other side? So when I was really young, which you know this, I excuse me. When I was really young, very like 2 years old, I was caught up in a situation. My biological mother couldn't take care of me, and my dad had to take me from the situation and kind of create and find his own new family for me. So she was involved in a lot of drugs. She couldn't take care of me. And it was kind of the professionals in my life at that time, namely like my godfather, who was my lawyer in severing the parental rights of my biological mother, as well as as who I consider my mom now. Those people, they all fought for me and advocated for me as a child to have the best life that I could have and all the opportunities. So growing up, I was very cognizant of kind of the privileges that I had been given just by people stepping in, and then that kind of molded with experiences I had. I had a best friend commit suicide at 17, and it really kind of changed the way that I look at my relationships and the people around me, and also realizing just like kids are so influenced by the events that happen to them when they're
Mm-hmm.
young. And so when I was looking at, potential careers and jobs for myself, I was like, what is the one thing I can do in order to be able to make an impact on a young person and kind of make them feel like, one, they're not alone, two, that I can give them the tools and resources to be able to become the best versions of themselves, and three, just kind of like have a fun and like I don't know, joyful environment. And it kind of all just landed in on medicine, in particular pediatrics.
Mm. I love that. That's such a like a fun story. Well, not fun. It's obviously a challenging story to tell because you yourself are still, I'm sure, would consider yourself working through a lot of that those life events, that trauma, honestly, that comes with it. And I think like you're such a perfect example of we're never going to be perfect and we're never going to find ourselves at the end of a journey. The journey just keeps going.
Mhm.
And so why not make the most of it and find something that you can support others in their growth and their values in, which is just so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that, the most important thing anybody can do is really just invest in other people, right? Because I mean, like, what are we? I mean, we're just human beings on Earth, right? And but what makes but what makes life meaningful is the ability to connect, and is the ability to tell a story, and is the ability to, like say me too, and like create that connection.
Yeah, I love that. You and I both are breathwork practitioners, meditation practitioners. Mostly, I think I'll speak for myself as a result of like, ooh, I need something to soothe myself when I'm not feeling in my skin or feeling ungrounded or, I dare I say the word anxious. And you've used meditation and mindfulness throughout your medical school journey, but also as a part of your story to get where you are today when it comes to practicing medicine. So can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about how you found like meditation, mindfulness, soft belly breathing, and yeah, how that continues to look for you today?
I feel like it's such a fun story because it kind of came in different forms. First was it's not that I was ever against any of these sort of, I guess you can call them like Eastern medicine
Mm-hmm.
practices, or different modalities of ways to treat people and anxieties and so on and so forth. But I really became to invest in it when I understood it scientifically. I took a physiology class in undergrad at U of A with a professor, Dr. Ann Baldwin, who she specifically looks at Reiki and also mind body interactions in particular. So we learned the physiology behind like starting from top to bottom, like the vagus nerve, and sort of like how do we stimulate that? You know, it's 4 seconds in, hold for four, out for four, creating that cyclic movement and how that can affect your entire body. So then that's the research that I was actually ended up doing with her, which is equine therapy. So it was like a different type of modality where we were teaching folks with neurodegenerative disorders at a retirement home up in Tucson, how to breathe with horses and kind of understand their connections and their electromagnetic fields, how they sort of combine and how they can regulate their heart rhythm and their breathing rhythm and be able to create a good, or I guess a better stress response in their bodies. And so then that was kind of the intro. And then I was sort of taking my own journeys as I started to experience my own, expectations of myself, my own anxieties, my own mental health struggles, which then we both went and saw, you and I, both the same person, to like as a life coach to kind of figure out where life was going. And she started doing breath work in every session that that's how we would start every session with her. And so then I started doing it myself more so then. And then I took that into medical school. It was obviously very tough, and I didn't really experience the brunt of that anxiety and sort of that pressure until I was in medical school. And so I was like, I need something to like release this energy. And there was a behavioral health professor at her name's Dr. Helgo, and she had introduced the concept of mind body medicine, which is a national body that basically trains people in different meditative techniques, and then they say, hey, go to your workplaces, go to your institutions and teach other people these different meditative techniques. And so us together, me, her, and a few others, we basically created the mind body medicine group at our well, I guess you can call it chapter in a way, at our institution. And so then we basically started teaching other students how to do these different meditative techniques. And so really, I'm being long-winded because that's me, but essentially like, taking that and then into medicine it's like, how do we incorporate these techniques for our patients as well?
Yeah. I think, excuse me, I have like a frog in my throat today. I think something that's so important to continue to consider and think about is that, like, we've always looked at division between Western and Eastern philosophies, be it medicine or something else, right? Culture or politics. But it's really refreshing to hear that, especially young doctors like yourself, are thinking more about, and I wouldn't even label something like meditation or mindfulness or any sort of breath work as Eastern anymore. I think it's a very universal human experience that incorporating that into a very evidence-based setting is really important, because we can prove why woo-woo works, right? Even down to the idea of crystals, being it might be a placebo effect, but is it working for you in your quote-unquote healing journey? Sure. And I'm a big believer specifically in breath work and inviting fresh, new, expansive energy in, especially when you're either under the weather or have an ailment or a sickness that, requires a bit more attention or more intensive treatment. So it's really cool to hear that that is becoming more mainstream, I guess, because it should be, it needs to be. It's what we naturally do as human beings. We breathe, we connect with breath. And I love that so much.
And when you think about it, whenever your body is sick, it's just a response to something that's external that is causing your ailment, right? And so it's the same thing with stress and anxiety. So if you're able to regulate a stress response per se, let's say like you're feeling stressed out about an event, what's to say that you couldn't do that with a different ailment in your body? You have a cardiac condition, we want to regulate our cardiac rhythm, or I don't know, or like you have GI issues and that's just directly caused by, whatever it be, then you can, sit and breathe and help your digestion. It's a lot more nuanced than people think that it is.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there are tons of people who don't believe in it. I've had doctors be like, you're like researching equine therapy, and like, why in the world would you do that? Or even like I had talked about, this mind body medicine stuff with an older pediatrician, and he was like, "You're not going to use that ever, so I don't know why you would do it." And I was like teach their own, you know what I mean? Like even if it, it doesn't help everybody, and that's okay to recognize as well. Is that like if it works for somebody, I think that that's all you need.
Yeah. Well, I think, my breathwork teacher recently told me usually the obstacle to healing is trying to heal in the first place. And I think that is more speaking to like, the things that we've been through, the experiences that we've had, and what emotions that continues to feel like in our bodies on a regular basis. But I'd also argue the same for medical conditions, right? Like, it's your body catches up with you eventually, and a medication or a form of treatment isn't always going to be the only answer. And so half the battle is your mindset around, well, this is the only answer. And so when you apply a medication, a treatment, whatever, and it doesn't necessarily work right away, people get frustrated, but that only exacerbates the illness, the sickness, right? It's like, how do we bring in that more openness, but also the mindset of like, okay, I have the support I need. I'm headed in the right direction. The people around me like are here to help whatever happens to me. And I think oftentimes, myself included, like whenever I hear something about medical conditions or a threat to my health, I get scared. Like fear takes me over. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want that to happen to me. And so it's that like balance between, what's evidence-based and what can we actually physically treat you with. And then that energetic body, that layer of like nuance to your point of, where do your emotions play? Where does your mindset about what's going on play? And how can we combine the two to ultimately heal the whole person? We talk about that all the time in breathwork and Reiki, even in yoga. It's like you're not coming here once and you're fine and dandy. It's the same thing with going to a doctor or a hospital. It's always going to be a journey where you have to acknowledge all parts of who you are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that mindfulness in particular of like even the mindfulness of having a disease and like really accepting the fact that, oh, this is something that I have, it's a chronic condition or whatever, like that makes the biggest difference in the world of treatment. Like we talk a lot about in medical school in particular about how you get people from like a pre-contemplation phase of like, oh, this is happening to me, to like a contemplation phase that's like, oh, okay, like these are the steps that I need to take to get better. And then even just like that action piece that you and I talk about a lot of like, oh, are you doing the things that you need to do in order to to combat some of these things that you're experiencing or chronic conditions that you have, whether that's taking a medication, doing soft belly breathing. It really just applies to anything, in my opinion.
Yeah. When you're like, I'm very curious, like when you're diagnosing or evaluating a patient, I call you all the time. I'm like, how many Motrin can I take and I be okay? And you're like, you're going to be fine if you take 3 instead of 2 today. I call you for all the things. But like when you're diagnosing maybe a serious condition, right? Or, just interacting with a patient in the way that you just shared, what is your mindset like as far as, okay, this is evidence-based, like I need to evaluate the scientific things, right? Of like, okay, I'm not a doctor, so I might sound silly here, but like, anything from their blood pressure to their body temperature to like the symptoms they're describing. And how do you balance that then with that more, energetic, spiritual side of like, okay, what do they really need right now? Do they need comfort? Do they need me to ask more questions? Like, what is that like for you?
It's more unique for me, I will say, than I feel like a lot of my other colleagues. Because like I said, I lead with that connection side of things. So usually the first thing I do in a room is identify what the patient needs first. Emotionally more so, because I don't feel like I can personally help the person. I mean, like I can interview them and ask them questions about why they're there and so on and so forth. But if we don't have a good sense of rapport and they don't feel comfortable and they're in the most, I really think that any patient that comes into a hospital setting or hospital setting or even in a clinic, they're at their most vulnerable, right? So they're sitting there, they're basically telling you all their fears, all their worries, And so you kind of have to find a balance of like, I can't just give this person just like a bunch of facts. And I also can't just like, let them cry on my shoulder either. So I have to learn to like understand and tailor, you know, each individual meeting to that individual patient. And maybe I think about it maybe too systematically in a way. But honestly, it's kind of become a gut feeling for me. As you know, like I'm a clairsentient person. I'm just really good with people's emotions and feelings. So usually for me, I know exactly right away what somebody needs. But that's not the case for everybody.
Right.
Um, but on the more scientific side, it is kind of crazy. Like you go through this rigorous study of medicine, you're staring at books for hours, you're studying 14 hours a day, you take these huge board exams, and some of it is just so remote in or so, I can't say that right. It just kind of like calculates and happens on its own. And what I mean by that is I look at somebody's blood pressure and I see it, and then immediately my brain just goes like, oh no, that's like hypertensive. That's too high. Or okay, what are the things that cause that are too high? Is it like stress, caffeine, or do they smoke? Do they have a kidney issue? Do they have a pituitary issue? Like all those things run through my head immediately, and then it kind of like, oh, this person's 42, so then that means that they probably have this or they have this. So it's really kind of crazy how the training of medicine kind of forces you to be so,
Yeah.
I don't know, robotic in a sense.
I'm picturing the math meme of the girl like looking around. It's like or in The Hangover when Zach Galifianakis is gambling and he's like looking and he figures out the cards. I really do feel like it is that. Plus, hopefully, wherever you get experience for a career path in general, they give you that hands-on experience to be able to really truly like help and support people and not just do a job, so to speak.
You've seen Good Will Hunting, right?
Yes.
Yes. So there's
Not
a
in a
part.
long time though. Wow.
It's my favorite movie,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite things to explain like how people like know medicine is that like he has this conversation with Minnie Driver's character, and she's like, I don't understand. How are you so smart? How do you know all this? And then he creates um, this metaphor, and he says, oh, like Beethoven, he just like looked at the piano and just knew how to play. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like when you go through the process and people just don't get it because it's just something you just know how to do now. And there's no way of like taking your mind out of it. So I just like know how to, I don't know. I just know how to look at a patient. I know how to talk to them. I know how to do that.
Yeah. I think in more woo-woo terms, if you will, like that's you just sharpening your intuition. That's already naturally attuned to that, right? Of like supporting others, helping others. For you, it's the medical field, right? For somebody else that's listening, it might be a very different career path or not having to do with their career at all, right? It's just that gut feeling of, okay, I knew this somehow, and now I'm having the opportunity to practice it and make safe mistakes where I can, so that in a situation where I can't make that mistake, I trust my gut fully. I know exactly what it's trying to tell me, and then I also know exactly what to do about it, which I think you highlighted. The action piece is always the part that we find ourselves challenged with, right? We have that awareness and acknowledgement of it, but Reese would be so proud. But the action
She
is,
sees that, she's just looking down on us and like, hey,
yeah, we're
learn something.
realized adults. Not to say, we learned it, not to say that I embody taking action on things every day. I was texting you earlier, and even just like my response, I get so overwhelmed and then I stop taking action altogether. And I won't say I get lazy, but I get like frozen, which I know is actually a real thing. But even just having that awareness of like, okay, this is the state that I'm in, and this is how I can either reach out for help or take action myself is just so important.
It's the hardest part.
Hardest part. So as you think about like moving forward in your career path, right? What do you see as the future of mindfulness, meditation, medicine, and the future of combining some of these practices that have been kept separate for so long, and what that looks like soon?
I mean, I see mindfulness and meditation and so on and spirituality really playing a role in two sides of medicine. One, the training of medical professionals, and then also with patients. I think it's easier to talk about at this point from the perspective of a medical trainee, just simply because I, don't have my whole repertoire of patients. I don't have my panel yet, and I haven't gotten to practice a lot of the things that I would like to with them. However,
Mm-hmm.
but what I will say is like when I have expressed my knowledge in the manner, when I'm talking to these residency programs, they're like, we need this because our residents are struggling. Our residents are worked too hard. They have burnout.
Yeah.
They don't know how to take care of themselves. We have twice the depression rates. We have twice the suicide rates as any other profession. And so it's something that I think that it's a necessity to incorporate from a medical trainee standpoint. And we've gotten better as a society, like, mandatory work hours, like being cut down, paying us better, like all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that there's a level that every resident needs in order to be able to like obey their mood, understand what they need, and be able to advocate for those needs. And I think that a lot of that goes with mindfulness and understanding who you are as a person, and whether that's spirituality or not. I think it is. And then on the patient side, I would say that we're kind of in an epidemic with social media with kids. We Kids have access to bully each other 100% of the time. You can't go
Mm-hmm.
home and get away from it like we could. Like there is a mental health epidemic amongst all of our children, just in general. And so I think where I see the future of mindfulness is being able to help these kids take small tools. I don't think, you're going to be able to convince a 17-year-old, maybe 17-year-old teenager to be able to do box breathing, but you might be able to find him something that he or she can take and go home with and be like, I'm going to try this
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it'll help.
Yeah. I love that. I think that problem or that epidemic extends even to adults. I know you're specializing particularly in young people and children, but at the end of the day, we all have that. And so I think just by walking the walk, like that's the biggest thing that I'm learning. You got to show up as your full self every day. It doesn't need to be your best self, but your full self. So as if you were my doctor as a kid, I'd be like, oh, he does breath work in the mornings or whatever. He needed to take a minute. I think it's always really important to be able to share that story with people who are like skeptical or not sure or honestly really impressionable. Like you meet so many teenagers and young adults even who you're like, oh, they think they have life figured out. We've all been there. If you're older than that and listening to this, and it's challenging to watch, honestly, of like how sucked into. I was at a party a couple of days ago celebrating, I think it was like a high school graduation, and just to listen to how people speak to each other, right? Or like what's important to them. And we joke that we want to stay young and hip and like, be in the know with these trends and what these folks care about. But at the same time, it's like, whoa, is that what you should care about? And there's such this delicate balance between like letting them figure it out on their own and also helping support them on the journey and trying to make it the least traumatic one possible, I will say.
And I think some of the like one of the most beautiful things about like human existence in general is just like being able to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Like mindfulness, looked to me very different than it does now. And if I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have gone through like all of med school, then I probably wouldn't be the same kind of practicing mindfulness person that I am now. But also, like, if you would have asked me, 10 years ago, I probably would have been like, no, I don't need it. Or maybe playing video games was my form of mindfulness, and I didn't even realize that that was what I needed or like I didn't put two and two
Yeah.
together. And so I think like of course, like to your point, like adults, I think everybody needs it. Everybody needs some sort of practice. It doesn't have to be you don't have to follow a book. You just find what's right for you, and
Yeah.
you work for it.
Yeah. Some days I hate to break it to you, but my self-soothing or need is indeed let's doom scroll or let's be rotting in our bed and watching TV. And I have no shame in that. For a while, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not productive. But Sometimes it is, and I think as long as we can openly share and support others in assessing their habits, it's it's a good conversation to have for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Well, you kind of beat me to my next question, um, and I like to ask this to all my folks. What is your favorite part of the human experience? And I feel like you have a few.
I do. I feel like this is my favorite question that you we had talked about like previously about things we talk about in your podcast and so on and so forth. I think
Figuring it out. That's
yes.
one.
I'm trying to think of it as more of a story. I don't know if I could. I don't think I can encapsulate exact words. But what I will say is, so I had a patient when I was in the pediatric ICU. He came in. He was a preemie baby. He was only about a month old. He had had a traumatic birth. His parents were not in the picture. He was in a foster home, and so he didn't have anybody at the hospital. And so it was kind of a situation where you have the opportunity as a professional to be able to invest in someone personally. And so what I did was is I took every break that I had and I made sure that I held this baby and rocked him to sleep. I made sure that, when he was crying, that somebody was there for him. I'd feed him on my breaks. I'd let the nurses have a break because there's a lot of patients. And as a medical student, I often have more of an opportunity to be able to insert myself personally, just because I don't have as much of responsibilities as some of these doctors do. And
Yeah.
so, and just like being able to get him, he was there for like 2.5 weeks, which is a long time for a hospital stay. And ultimately he ended up getting better and going home, and he had all these things he had to follow up with because he had a lot of chronic medical conditions. But my point is that like my favorite thing about a human experience is when somebody expresses kindness for somebody else. And I don't even necessarily mean it is that's not the reason why I did it in the first place, right? Was to be kind. I just did it because I saw someone who needed something and I just wanted to give it to them. Even though they can't really express at 1 month old, they cry, but my point is that when you see a stranger walk up to somebody else and they compliment them for no reason, or they hold the door open, or they say excuse me, or they pay for the person in front of them, like that's the human experience. And like it kind of goes back to the very beginning of our conversation of like the human experience is about connecting to others. Like if you do not let yourself be vulnerable and connect to another individual, you're missing out on some of the brightest and happiest moments in life, I think. I mean, even at 28, right? We're still young. We have so much life to live. But
Yeah.
that's what I've held on as a piece of, I guess, a piece of my happiness and joy that I get from the human condition.
Yeah. That's so fun. I love that. What a cute little baby. And the coolest thing is they'll most likely never be able to repay you. And I think that's where like it's that experience of unconditional
Mm.
kindness, love, whatever word can follows that, right? Of tolerance, patience, right? I think it's really challenging to remember, especially in the society we find ourselves in. It can be very tit for tat, right? But can you just give a little bit more of your energy to someone who might need it, be it the form of an act of service or I'm going into the love languages now, but like just that little like affirmation that somebody might need to hear in order for them to make it through their day. I think that's just such a beautiful way that we get to connect. We get to
And then
connect.
and then it even becomes even more special when you apply it to your relationships with people that you know.
Yeah.
I think you're a perfect example because I know you so well spiritually, emotionally that like when you text me or when you call me, I know exactly what to say to you. I know it's the words of affirmation that you
Hmm.
need. And so to be able to give that gift to somebody, whether it's your romantic partner, your best friend, your parent, your brother, your sister, like understanding somebody is also a part of the human
Oh,
condition. So like being able to give that to them and then being able to say like, wow, like I did that for an individual and I gave them that peace and kindness and love and respect, I think is is the ultimate part of the human condition.
yeah. What's interesting, and you're making me think about this, is like sometimes I said this like tit for tat earlier, right? I think it's a
Hmm.
layer deeper, even of is does our ego want us to do this, or does like the soul part of us want to do this, right? Like you didn't go rock that baby because it would get you a promotion or even like put you in good graces with the doctors that you're working with. I think there's a level of intuitiveness that comes from like, I just feel the need to hug this person or say these words or, share this story in hopes that they might not take anything away from it. They might actually turn around and say, didn't need that, didn't want it, thanks, goodbye.
Hmm.
But I think there's such a beautiful level of vulnerability between understanding what a person needs to receive or maybe even wants and is scared to ask for, and then being able to meet them, and also extending yourself
Hmm.
without that like, ooh, what's this gonna get me, which
Hmm.
unfortunately also like I even find myself doing that of like, okay,
Yeah.
well, like, is this going to be helpful for me down the road? Right. And I think there's certain contexts where you have to set that boundary of like, hey, I'm not going to act on this or support this or whatever
Hmm.
unless I know it's also good for me. But I always see online like it costs $0 to be kind, and it
Hmm.
costs $0 to treat someone like a human being or with love or whatever. And I think sometimes we treat it a little bit more like it's a really expensive thing that we're doing, when in reality it's so human, and it takes very little effort to potentially make a really big impact on the people in your life or someone totally strange to you.
And you have no idea what anybody's going through, right? So like you
Yeah.
could be you could that compliment can change the entire trajectory of somebody's life. I've always believed that. It's the small things, it's the things that you can do on a regular basis. And like going back to your point, like I have to set boundaries with myself all the time. It's
Oh,
emotionally
yeah.
exhausting to trying to read everybody and trying to give them everything that they need. And it's kind of my life struggle and like my own, I think,
Mm-hmm.
lesson in life to learn how where that healthy level is, because even I, like, sometimes I will realize that my ego will get in the way. I'll be doing something for somebody, and then I'll realize, what am I doing this for? Like, yes, I think it's
Sure.
always out of good intention, but like, there are parts of me when I'm low and my glass isn't filled to the top, like for
Mm-hmm.
myself, that like I am like, oh, like why didn't this person respond the way that I wanted them to? And it's like, wait a minute, like, okay, what was the reason we did this in the first place? And so
Yeah.
like it's not, being kind and doing these things is it's not linear, right? It's not like, oh, I can do this all the time, because I
Yeah.
can't. I'm a human being. I make mistakes. I expect when I shouldn't, and so on.
I always my one of my best friends and my manager at yoga, she always says it's not about you. When you show up as the teacher, it's not about if your students liked your class or your music or the words that you used. It's about creating a safe space for them to show up for themselves and do whatever work that comes through. And I think that's true for just being humans, right? I think that's one of the four agreements. Like, don't take anything personally. It's
Oh.
somebody could tell you the nicest thing in the whole world or the compliment you've been waiting to hear, and then you don't receive it because you're so focused on, well, what did everybody else think? Or, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mhm.
Um, versus just taking that one person's interaction or connection with you is like, oh, that's all I wanted or needed to receive today. I fall subject to that a lot of like, I want everybody to tell me how good my class is or that they loved my playlist. But at the end of the day, it's like, it only takes one,
Mhm.
but it also takes a certain love of yourself to be able to fully show up, be vulnerable. And if nobody liked it, then who cares? That's about them, not about you, you
And you can
know?
be like, I like my playlist. I liked what I did today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's not about you ever, you know? I love it. Cool. Why do you think spiritual connection is important?
I mean, yeah, I feel like we've kind of chatted about it, right? So, like, when you mean spiritual connection, do you mean to like other people, or do you mean like spiritual and beyond, like life? Like meaning like people who have either passed on. Do you mean like that kind of spiritual connection, or do you mean between people who are on Earth?
You take it either way, both ways, neither ways. Whichever way you want to go.
I think we've talked about like the importance of spiritual connection with one another. I think we understand like that empathy and that intuitiveness. But what I will say is like, being in science and in medicine, you're kind of expected to kind of throw some of these spiritual ideas out of the window. Like sometimes you're like, people always make jokes that surgeons are God, they have God complexes because they believe that they can fix anything, or that like, maybe God doesn't exist, or so on and so forth. That's a form of spirituality, at least in my brain and how I think about it. But I believe in science and things all the time. I think the perfect example of kind of that and understanding my own life path is when I was really anxious about the process of residency. I wanted to be able to find comfort um, and I guess a sign from the universe that I was doing the right thing, that I was going to the right place, I was making the right decisions. And you and I had had a manifestation session probably, I don't know, it was probably like 5 months ago now. I would
Yeah.
say 5 or 6 months ago now. And we said, okay, let's pick a sign, right? And so then I chose a rabbit at that time. It was something that actually previously Reese, when I had a spiritual intuitive session with her, she had said a rabbit is going to be important for you one day. And that was 2018. So then when I brought that into our space and I was like, nope, the rabbit is going to be important for me now. And also you and I both read that book about signs as well. I can go on and on about it. But nonetheless, we chose that. And then lo and behold, I had had a meeting with my current program director before we had gone through the interview process. And then I finished that. I went out for some lunch and I came home, and there was a jackrabbit, just not a regular rabbit. It was a jackrabbit, and it was just sitting on the driveway, and it was just had its huge ears just like perked up, just staring at me. And then in my head, immediately, I knew. I was like, no, this is where I'm going. This was the gut feeling. And so then even through the whole process of like choosing which place I wanted to go to, I was like, this is the spiritual sign that I needed in order to accept and also just push forward into the career I wanted. So I say it's vitally important. I think, being connected to your higher self, the people that have passed on, or your spiritual guides, are so important. I've got a lot of them, as I've had from Reese told me. I have like three or four of them that are just kind of sitting there. So I think that if you're able to like delve in and really kind of open yourself to the possibility of these signs, you could just go anywhere you want, really.
I love that. You know, I'm a science girly. My
I know.
whole camera roll is license plates of angel numbers and stuff like that. I love that story. I always remember the rabbit. I actually knew you were going to say that before you went there.
Did you?
Amidst a lot of the other beautiful signs that you've also gotten along the way, too.
Oh yeah, my relationship,
Yeah.
like knowing that it was the right person, because in his email it had his name 39 at gmail.com. And if anybody knows my family, they know that 39 is like the number in my family. It was my dad's in professional baseball, so it's been his number his entire career, and it's something that all of our passwords, all of everything that we have, there's some sort of in some way. I shouldn't be sharing that, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, it's things like that, I think, that give you a little nod. It's a little bit of a nod to the work that you've done on this earth, and it's saying like, hey, there you go. Keep moving. Keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's a beautiful reminder that as much as we like to be in control, right? Like you're talking about the God complex and stuff like that. We think we're in control, but it's a little scary, but it's also very liberating to know that no matter what you believe in, higher power, universe, nothing at all, there is an intelligence at play beyond our physical human bodies on this planet Earth. And signs like that always reestablish my faith in that, or my understanding of that.
and I think medical professionals, the ones that don't invest in that spirituality, have a very difficult time, for at least from my experience, when something negative happens in the medical atmosphere, especially like I'm dealing with kids, right? So inevitably a kid will die. Inevitably a kid will get sick, will get an illness that they don't deserve.
Right.
Accidents happen, so on and so forth. And so there is so much that we have control over. We can choose to intubate the patient, we can choose to give them medicine, we can choose to do all these things. You have control on that. But sometimes it's just not enough. And there's sometimes you're left with a question of like, what could I have done? Is there more I could have done? And sometimes the answer is no, there isn't. And you to be able to look and like allow yourself to just sort of understand that some things are out of your control and sometimes life just takes its course. It's very liberating for us as medical professionals, or at least me and my perspective, because it's like, I mean, this is very sad. And so to be able to say, okay, like it's really, really sad and I can feel and I can cry right now, but
Yeah.
also it allows me to free myself from it once I'm done feeling those emotions.
That's beautiful and so important. Like letting yourself totally go there,
Hmm.
honestly, and feel it is really hard. I did
Very.
that today. I was like, I'm gonna cry. But you really do feel so much better afterwards. And that way, emotions don't get stuck within you. Like when we talk about dis-ease and things of that nature, right?
Mhm.
I do believe that a lot of illness is caused by harboring some of that energetic stuff. Not all things, or
Yeah.
not totally because of that, but yeah, I mean, we got to take care of ourselves first. And if crying or screaming is what comes up, then let it.
Stress is a killer. It's like basically the number one cause of a lot of our diseases nowadays. So,
Yeah, scary. I just want to be a frog on a log, stress free. But that frog probably has a little bit of stress in its life too. So I don't
and
know.
what meaning is there if you don't have stress, right? So,
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. What's a book or resource that you would share with listeners about anything we discussed today, or for someone who maybe is just starting their journey, be it as a medical professional, as a student of spirituality or life?
so I think I like to recommend this book to everybody because you don't need to be a spiritual person or a religious person to be able to kind of consume it. I believe it is the epitome of human condition and the human experience, which is Tuesdays with Maury. That book was written in the 70s. It's by far my favorite book. I read it every so often because I know there's always something new to learn. Just to give the context, it's about a professor and his student who connected while the student was in college. The student wasn't even in his class per se. What he was studying was like something in business, and he decided to take a philosophy course because he was required to. And so he met this professor, or Maury, um, and he ends up getting. So basically, what ends up happening is they part ways after graduation. He says, "Oh, I'll keep in touch. I'll keep you keep in touch." They don't keep in touch. Basically, the student does everything wrong with life. He marries the wrong person. He chooses a job for money. He's not happy. He doesn't have kids. All these different life decisions that if you would have asked him, when he was back in college, he wouldn't have done. So then, flash forward, I think it's like 20 or 25 years. He opens up on TV and he sees his old professor who is on like it's like a primetime news show, and it says he had been diagnosed with ALS. So he decides to reach out to the professor and he wants to say goodbye to him one last time. So he goes to see him. And then he says, how has your life been all these years? The professor asks him, and he says, honestly, I hate my life. I'm not in love. I don't like my job. I made all the wrong decisions that you told me that I shouldn't make. And he says, you know what? You are going to come to my house every Tuesday until I die, and we're going to go over a life lesson every Tuesday. And it is just such a moving and emotional and empathetic, and just like there's so much to learn about love and life and family and relationships. It's just I could talk about it forever. But yes,
Yeah,
I would say people, especially who are new to spirituality, it's great.
I love that. I know you talk about that book all the time.
I love that book. I talked about it in my residency interviews. It's the first book I recommend, and it's an easy read. I think it's
Yeah.
like 200 pages. Have you read it? I forget.
I don't think so. I always mix that book up with another one where
The Alchemist.
No, no, Matthew gave me that book though. I haven't read it yet. It's on my list.
Fantastic.
Yes. No, it's the one. It's similar. It's where he's like a ride operator at a fair or a carnival, and he dies, and he's watching all these people live their lives like around him. Like he sees all the perspectives. I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
god, this
No,
is gonna drive me nuts. I'll put it in the show notes. Slash, I'll text it to you. But also a very
another
good one.
another great one is When Breath Becomes Air, and it's more of a medicine perspective. It's about a neurosurgeon who's going through residency, and he's diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and so it's about his perspective on his patients and like how it has changed, knowing that he was going to die. And it's a real story. It's also just a it's very sad, very very emotional, but also amazing perspective on human beings and like patients and medicine and so on. That's another one. I have a bunch of them.
Beautiful. Well, if you want to share any others, you can chat them to me over via text, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Cool.
Last but not least, where can our listeners find you?
They can find me on, let's see, they can find me on Instagram.
Ooh.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, online or otherwise. Well, you'll be in Loma Linda soon, so.
Yeah, I'll be on Linda. Yeah, Matt EK96 is my Instagram profile name. But yeah, that's
And
me.
if you ever need a doctor, I'll be slipping your cell phone number to everybody I know.
There you go.
I'm just joking. I would never do that. Oh, goodness. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I love you so much. And I always love hearing your perspective. It's something that, I don't know a lot about. And so it's really refreshing to know that not only people like you, but a friend like you is out there doing all the things and trying to change the world just by being who you are. And I
Well,
love
I
that.
appreciate that. And you're doing the work. You're giving people access to this kinds of information, which I think is very commendable.
Thank you. All right. I love you so much.
Love you too. Adios.
Bye.